Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. We really appreciate it. This is a presentation on Visual Tourettic OCD. I hope you find this presentation inspiring, empowering, insightful, and resourceful. And I'm Matthew Bannister. I'm a passionate IOCDF grassroots advocate. I am also a volunteer peer support worker for the OCD community. And I'm also a big fan of Carol Edwards and Jonathan Grayson.
And I'm Carol Edwards, a former CBT therapist turned writer, advocate specialising in obsessive compulsive disorder.
And I am Jonathan Grayson, and I've only been working with OCD since 1978, so hopefully I know a little something that will be useful today. So, Visual Tourettic OCD. And this used to be known as obsessive staring, and we've changed the name to Visual Tourettic OCD for two reasons. That often the staring, well, let me describe what it is. The individuals with this find that when they're with other individuals, that their eyes tend to look where they are not supposed to look. So most of the time that involves looking at people's sexual parts, whether it's breasts or genitals or whatever. But, you know, it could equally be that if they saw somebody who had like some horrible thing on their face or some other part of their body, that they would find their eyes drawn to that. An incredibly strong urge. And the thing is that the reason for the eyes going there is not an interest in sexuality or anything else. The interest is purely that they're afraid that people are going to see them looking at this and they're going to be considered like, why are you looking at me like that? What is wrong with you? Are you a pervert? So there's always kind of an underlying social anxiety to it. At one point, it was called obsessive staring, and we changed the name because the urge to do this is not like it's not always like regular OCD where you are purposely engaging in a ritual. The staring most of the time is not ritualistic in terms of I'm going to look just to make sure. It really feels involuntary. Is it actually tourettic? And the answer is definitely maybe. We changed it in part to this because if you want to explain to an individual why you're staring at them and you say OC staring since nobody's heard of that, they're going to just still look at you strangely. If you were to say, I had visual Tourettic OCD, and you know, you've heard of Tourette's where people have to, not have to, but they come out with saying things that they shouldn't say, and they don't really mean it. And it's like, in this case, it goes to the eyes. So it becomes an easier explanation because you know, whenever we're treating OCD, we always want to say, well, how would you handle the worst? This gives the sufferer a way to be able to do that. There are a couple of forms of visual Tourettic OCD. So in one form, the individual actually never stares at genitals or breasts or whatever, but they're in constant fear that they're doing it. So this is a more typical OC presentation, and a lot of the effort is spent trying to make sure they're not doing something that they're never doing and worrying about did they do it. In the second form, people are actually doing it at times, and they may be doing it in some conscious way where they know they're doing it. They may be doing it kind of unconsciously, so not realizing that, but that's where their eyes fell. And if you want to imagine what this is like for the sufferer, again, imagine you're talking to somebody who is scantily clad, and you're trying to just look at their face and you're very conscious of whatever else is there. Or again, imagine something that, you know, of another nature, that they have some horrible deformity on their face, and you know you're not supposed to be staring at that part of the face, and you keep being drawn to it. You know, like in all OCD, you know, one of the things that's going to make something more attention demanding is that I don't want it. You know, for anybody with a pure O kind of symptom where it's like, don't think about something. Well, the only way to not think about it is to think about it. As soon as you say, don't think about X, if you're already thinking about it. So the idea of like, don't stare, don't stare, don't stare is very painful. So we have one group where they're actually staring, and we'd like to think of it as, do they have actual proof? That is, somebody has said to them, what are you looking at? Because one of the things that people with this do is they often have a lot of behaviors to make sure they're not staring, and the behaviors look odd. So they might always stare off and try to look out in the distance and never give eye contact to make sure they're not looking down, or give too much eye contact. They were looking straight on. And so people actually are behaving strangely to them. They assume it's because they're staring, but it's actually because of what they're staring is doing. And a third version is people noticing something in the periphery of their vision, and they just don't want to notice what's in the periphery, but because they don't want to notice what's in the periphery, they're noticing it. And there's some other forms of OCD where peripheral vision is the focus. And so each of these has slightly different treatments. A lot of times other obsessions and compulsions will be associated with this. That is, the person is also wondering, like, what's wrong with me? Like, I'm not this way, but maybe I am this way. So, if it's a person who identifies himself as, a straight person and they're looking at somebody of the same sex and staring at the genitals, it's like, but I'm not gay, but why am I doing this? Or, for whatever it is. So, they start to worry, like, am I having these other problems? And I think with that, let us go to the next slide.
So Matthew, shall I just mention what I was going to say about
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
Go for it, Carol.
Okay. So my understanding of visual tourettic OCD is a type of OCD that involves releasing visual tics that land on people's private regions, given the appearance of staring inappropriately. So the fundamental difference there between classic and visual tourettic OCD is the tic, or that's how it feels for me. There doesn't seem to be another way to describe the tic-like feature in this subtype of OCD. So as far as I'm aware, this is why clinicians like Jonathan Grayson coined the term visual tourettic OCD. In my experience of living with this condition, I would say the ocular tension and releasing it does feel like an involuntary eye movement directed at people's private regions. So it may be tourettic in that sense. Another aspect is peripheral staring. For example, when my symptoms were severe, I couldn't help gazing at people around me, but maybe that was due to hyper awareness or a sense of threat from what I couldn't see around me. I've also had some people report staring automatically at animals' private areas and other things like a person's features, blemishes, and actions. Obsessions with the staring tic usually revolve around the fear of being caught and called names, such as a creep, paedophile, bestial, or just plain weird. I worried about being seen as having a different sexual orientation from what I know myself to be. So then I thought I could be transgender due to this unknown condition I was struggling with. There's nothing wrong with that, but when you're living with OCD, it is anxiety provoking because it does not agree with what's real, but feels like it does. A subsequent compulsion with visual tourettic OCD might be to avoid or escape from people, as I did. Others might avoid animals and children to prevent being caught and wrongly accused.
Yeah, and I can elaborate on that with my experience with visual tourettic OCD. So with the onset when this happened, I thought, am I losing my mind? What's happening? I didn't even know this was a form of OCD. And I was just in panic mode, constantly living in fear. Like I said, with the intrusive thoughts with this, saying, am I a pervert? Am I a pervert for doing this, staring at X, Y, and Z at people's body parts? The guilt and shame with this is horrendous. When I was really going through it severely, I was at rock bottom. My confidence was at rock bottom. It was heartbreaking. I thought my life was over. I was like, how can I communicate with people? If my eyes are going in these places, how are they going to judge me? Like, are they going to reject me? Are they going to outcast me? Are they going to just give me a really bad reputation for something that I am not? It was a horrendous experience. And with like the isolation part of this, because like you were saying, Carol, you want to avoid being in public places. You feel like the only way I can be safe now is basically being in my home. This is my safe space. But that can like, you can feel that it's like our mental prison, have you will. Because like you're no longer living a life, you're just stuck inside. But the fear of this is absolutely terrifying. The trauma aspects as well of this, where the stigma side of this can be really horrific. Not for everyone, but yes, it can be really harrowing experience, and suicidal thoughts can come with this as well. I experienced suicidal thoughts I had a plan to end it if everyone rejected me, like family, friends. It was just an awful, awful experience. I'll go on the next slide. So this is stigma. So for me, stigma was pretty real. When I was at my workplace, I was getting gossiped about. I could hear it crystal clear behind me. No one confronted me about this, and not everyone will go through this because, like John was saying earlier, there are pure forms of this where you think you're staring when you are not. So you don't have that smoking gun to your head. But for me, that was I was unfortunately, and I could hear them laughing about me, as you can see in these pictures. They were talking about me. They were saying, "Can you see where his eyes have landed? Like he keeps looking at me like this way. Like he's always weird around me, or he keeps giving me very like looks in my eyes constantly, pretty like full on, and I find it quite freaky." That's a lot of that stigma I was experiencing. It got to a point where I was moved to a different warehouse area, and they didn't say any reason. They just moved me and they made me cut up cardboard. I would usually do the normal warehouse job where I would load stock onto wheel wagons, but lorries, and trucks, and they made me do that instead, and that's all I was doing. They isolated me as well. I mean, you could say that would be like a great compulsion for me. I'd have to be around anybody. But the reverse side of the coin is I got no one to talk to. I feel like I've just been completely outcasted. And I had that sense of feeling that they didn't want me there anymore. And it was just heartbreaking. So I had to go on sick leave, and that was the best decision I ever made. Also, I know people in the community have gone through it differently. Some people live in ethnic communities with this, and it got to a point the stigma got so bad that they were talking about them. They had to move. They had to move from their area. That's how bad the stigma got. Or if they go into shops, for example, they could hear the same thing, the gossip about it. They could be shouting behind their backs. And it can be really debilitating. It can really, really, really hurt, especially when you know that this doesn't define who you are. And it's happening again, like you said, John, it's involuntary, it's fear and anxiety. And it was just horrendous experience. And the trauma effects with that is unbelievable. I still live with it today, where even I'm in a good place, my OCD is in remission. I can still be around places and I can still feel that anxiety be there. I can have flashbacks of these comments being made about me, hearing the conversations, going through all of that repeatedly in my mind can come back. And it is a harrowing experience. But again, like I said, not everyone will go through this. I don't want to frighten people. When people going through this with a pure O, it is still a debilitating disorder, but hopefully the stigma in that sense won't be as great. And social events as well. Again, like I say, shops, or if you go to like cinemas or anything like that, like before you watch a movie, if you go to an accountant, when you're feeling anxious, maybe before you watch that film, your eyes could wander in certain places, maybe not. Again, the stigma here is lessened by the more we talk about it, the more open we can be. People can feel that they can express what they're going through. Because I believe that one conversation can change everything. It can make so many things so much better for your life. You can be in a good place, in a good place of recovery, instead of feeling like I can't talk about this. I don't think like even the OCD community could understand because it's still fairly unknown. Whereas the more we talk about it, the more it's validated, the more you can like say, yeah, I have this too. And you can be more open, let's say, with people who do understand. I will go on the next slide. And I will pass it on to Carol.
Yeah, so earlier I mentioned about having transgender OCD. And when I talk about this obsession, I'm going to go right back to when I was a child, because that's when it started. Obviously, I didn't know what it was then. But I'm a twin to a boy. And I always felt that I wanted to be the boy. Now, whether that was because my parents didn't want a girl, I don't know. But I felt as though I wanted to be the boy. I wanted to know what it was like to be the boy, etc. Now, from there on, I started looking at the private regions of boys, and then I started looking at the private regions of girls, and then comparing. And then so the obsession was, am I transgender as I got older? And it carried on like that. And so this visual Tourettic OCD, that we call it, I had probably for as long as I can remember. And then when I realised what it was, I thought, well, I can do something about it. And that's when I realised I could do the ERP. And I recovered from the transgender OCD, and the tic doesn't bother me so much now.
And for me, it manifested with sexual OCD. I had vivid, intrusive thoughts of sexual images, of unwanted people, like masturbation, who I was talking to in front of me. I would have those images in my mind. I thought it was very disturbing, very distressing. And it just like panicked me even more when I was talking to that person. It was like I felt like I couldn't talk to them anymore. It's like I'm just having these images as well as what's happening. It was just so distressing. Even with SOOCD, like John was saying earlier, like I would be looking, let's say, at men and going looking at X, Y, and Z, and I'd be thinking, am I gay? Am I gay? I don't know. And that could maybe happen as well for if other people experience this who are gay. They could be looking at people on their, say, am I straight? And it can really like go into that cycle of like the doubt. I'll pass that on with you as well, John.
And I think I'd like to continue this by actually jumping to the next slide,
Sure.
because because in talking about treatment, one of the things we always do with treatment is we really want to understand the individual's constellation of symptoms, because on the face of it, it's like it just sounds so simple. You have the staring thing, you're worried you're going to get caught. But really, it is more complex because everybody has their own special features. So, for instance, some people only have the symptom with people that, who are strangers and, who don't know them, and they feel like they can't trust. Other people will have the symptom with anybody who might be important, but they might not have, they won't have it with their spouse because their spouse understands. I had one client who never had the symptoms with me because I'm a psychologist. I would understand. And so the symptoms wouldn't happen. So where does this occur? Some people one-on-one conversations are harder. Some people being in a group meeting are better or worse because there's, what do I focus on? Some people, and at one point we thought we found the entire secret of this because, there were a group of people who would report they find themselves staring but didn't know how. And one of the things we realized in talking to a few people is that when we're talking to people, if they're talking to us, we generally give them eye contact, because if we don't, they're going to be like, aren't you listening? But when we speak, our eyes actually wander. And a lot of times we'll look up when we're thinking and everything. And what we discovered is that for some people in that period, that's when their eyes would wander down and be staring. We're like, we've got the secret. But it turned out this only covers a portion of the sufferer. So what are the constellation of symptoms? Where does it occur? Where does it not occur? Is it peripheral and all this? And then, the things that both Carol and Matt were referring to is, what else might be accounting for this? Why is this happening? And, I kind of get subsidiary forms of OCD. In hyper awareness, we always say it's one of the few forms of OCD where the disaster seems to happen. Because if I say I'm not allowed to think this or life's terrible, life is actually terrible. In this problem, especially if I have the form where I'm actually staring and I get caught, it really does have negative effects, and I really have to find a way to cope with it. So treatment is going to be a constellation of things. So there's exposure and response prevention, but obviously not in the traditional sense like, oh, you're scared of staring genitals, lest you stare at genitals. Clearly can't go in public and just go up to strangers and stare at them. Staring at somebody who I have no fear of doesn't do anything for me. Looking at pictures doesn't do anything for me because I'm not scared of seeing those things. I'm scared of it in a particular situation. One of the things, and Matthew may talk about this, is there were a lot of avoided situations. I basically was making room for it. So how do we get the individual to be comfortable going back out in public and having a life? Because really the whole reason to overcome OCD is so I can have a life. And, we have certain things that are maybe in other forms of OCD, we wouldn't do this, but we might do this temporarily in this. So, people love sunglasses who have this problem because it actually makes it easier. We're not so much against that. One of the things about treatment, whenever somebody's doing exposure and response prevention, the issue is like, why would I take this risk and how would I handle the worst? So part of the reason calling it VTOCD, Visual Tourettic OCD, is to be able to have an excuse. We have, and I'm not saying everybody should do this, but there's a group of people who can pull this off. Some people are really good. They can just go up and say, this is what I've got. And they'll just explain it. It's like kind of take it or leave it. If you're such a person, that's great. Because you've cut it in the, you've explained yourself, they know to expect it and you feel comfortable. But that is literally not for everybody. So I'm not saying it, but at least have that in the back of your mind. Here's what I will say if I'm caught. All OCD tends to be a little better when I'm planning to do exposure versus I'm caught off guard. And one of the major problems with this is I really can't be conscious every moment of where my eyes are. One of the exposure things we do is what we call sneak peek. That is, there are situations which everyone is kind of like their attention is drawn to somebody and they kind of want to look at whatever. And the normal behavior is like when they think the person's not looking, that's when they take a quick look. And so part of the reason we do sneak peek is it takes the pressure of don't look as to when can I have an opportunity to look, and that makes it a little bit easier and a little more appropriate. We also practice having them look normal, because one of the strategies is like, where do I put my eyes when I'm not doing this? And again, I can't just have you staring at their eyes and just giving eye contact because that looks weird. So, we work on having eye contact, and something that Charlie Mansueto, a good friend of mine and therapist, is called the 3-point look, which is I'm staring at their eyes and okay, now let me just kind of look over here, up and there, to make it look normal. And that if I have a friend who knows about this problem, I can practice in terms of, am I doing something that looks normal? Like, let me practice looking normal. There are a few others, but again, in talking about that, it's hard to have that constant attention. And so I'm going to turn it over to Carol because what she talks about with regard to tics and how to work on that, it's really to not kind of raise the odds of having my eyes trained to respond a little different and to have a little bit more of a habit of automatically doing the most adaptive thing versus having to be every moment concentrating. None of this with the VTOCD is 100%. That is, most forms of OCD I feel really confident we can do a treatment that's going to definitely work, even though some people may have trouble. We can do a treatment that often works here. I think we need more research to further refine it, and I'm giving it to you, Carol.
Okay, thanks. So because a visual tic appears to be associated with an obsession, it made exposure challenging for me. For instance, I see the tic as a fundamental difference from classic OCD that I mentioned earlier. So let's assume I'm walking in the street. My obsession is that if my tics hit the private regions of passers-by, the consequence is that I'll never stop thinking about being labelled a creep and feeling ashamed, and I couldn't bear that. Consequently, suppose my subsequent compulsion is to avoid staring by lowering my head as I walk along. It temporarily relieves the obsessive fear of being labelled a creep and helps me cope. However, the premonitory urge related to the visual tic increases, making me want to free myself from the sensory pressure by releasing it. But I can't do that because I have to use response prevention for the obsession to render it inactive gradually. So I thought about what I could do. Then I realised I could try habit reversal training for the tic alongside ERP. For example, one of the techniques I used was clenching my fist tight so that the discomfort from my nails digging into my palms competed with the increasing somatic sensation around my eyes. It gave me time to suppress the visual tic when my attention was on the pinched feeling from my clenched fists. Next, with clenched fists, I would use Jonathan Grayson's sneak peek method and prepare to release the tic. At the same time, I would follow through with response prevention to address the obsession. In other words, I prepared to take a covert glance at someone's private region while simultaneously resisting the compulsion to avoid doing so. Occasionally, I found it hard to suppress the tic for long enough, and I'd stare too soon. But soon, with practice and additional competing responses, treating the ocular tension and obsession together worked for me. So in short, I'd resist escaping from the situation until my anxiety related to the obsession decreased to half of what it was before I started the exposure. So imagine it was 80 out of 100 on a 0 to 100 anxiety scale. When beginning the process, I'd wait until it came down to 40. By doing this repeatedly in small steps, the obsession reduced in intensity and frequency, and releasing tics didn't bother me so much. That's about it.
For me as well, like value-driven ERP, exposure response prevention, was a game changer for me. So basically, like John was saying earlier, how do I get comfortable in certain situations where how can I learn to like start recovery that's going to work for me? And like John was saying, with hyper awareness, hyper vigilance, how am I going to contend with this? So, okay. So for me, I incorporated, as you see here, like I say, mindfulness and self-compassion with that. And that was, again, a game-changing thing. So for example, if I, let's say, started doing exposure while I was going to, again, I live on the seaside, I'm very fortunate. I can go on the beach, there are people around me, but it's not too close to me. So I can kind of habituate to myself in that environment. But it's a value because I like walking on the beach. So I can be like more comfortable with that. I've got a reason, I've got a value right there and then. And I can enjoy being in the present moment. I can take in my senses around like the smell of the ocean, seeing the birds, hearing them, just getting that calmness effect, relearning what life is all about, living in that moment. And that really helped me gain my confidence back after being in rock bottom. And like Carol says, going like you could say like a hierarchy. For me, I'm thinking, okay, what other things of this theme of OCD, staring OCD, visual tourettic OCD, has taken away from me? So I like going to the cinema. I like going to restaurants. Okay, well, you know what? I'm going to start doing that again. So I started going to the cinema, sat there. I know I'm going to enjoy a movie. Yes, there are people around me, but I can do it where maybe at first I kind of sat a bit further back where I know not many people sit there, then ease myself further back in the middle. Because I like to enjoy a movie. And I thought to myself again, if they're watching that movie, are they going to be watching the movie more than me? Or are they going to be watching constantly when my eyes are going? And I thought, well, if that was me in the other situation, and I would be more looking at the movie than the other person. So that kind of assured me in that sense to then keep going with my exposures that is value driven to me, then I can enjoy that movie. And the more times I did that, the more confident I gained. And then after that, I would go to a restaurant, going to meals with my family, getting the order from the waitress or waiter, doing the usual small talk, smile. I think to myself, okay, you know what, this time, instead of just going there thinking I'm going to get caught staring, I'm going to enjoy this meal. I'm going to enjoy talking to the waitress, waiter, give a little bit of small talk, smile. And if my eyes happen to wander, so be it. I know that doesn't work for everyone, but for me, I had that bring it on mindset again, because I want to live a life. I don't want to live in a prison of fear for the rest of my life. So I thought, you know what, I have a choice right now. And that's the choice I'm going to go with. And that really start my confidence big time. I had that aha moment right there. And then when I was sat in that restaurant for the first time in years with this theme, I wasn't triggered because I was more focused on being with my family, talking to my family. And like John says, I am more comfortable talking to my family because they're like the most trusted people. And then when the waitress came, it was fine. There was no trigger. People walking by me, my eyes didn't dart or periphery like that, wasn't triggered. And it was a game-changing moment. And that really excelled me doing, right, I really want to do this, that. Like I went to a concert not so long ago. There were thousands of people there. And I enjoyed the moment being there. I enjoyed being in the live atmosphere. I enjoyed taking the moment, hearing the music, just being there right there and then. Instead of thinking like where my eyes are going to go, are people going to catch me? I'm more looking forward into going to doing this. And that took away the fear from me. And that's how I am in a great place of recovery with that. And also, if my eyes would happen to dart, I would give myself that self-compassion, saying it's a disorder, because it is. It's visual tourettic OCD. It doesn't define who I am. It's ego dystonic. It's the one thing I don't want to do, and it doesn't define me. And if it happens to happen, I'm okay with that. And with intrusive thoughts as well, like I had it where it was screaming at me, you're a pervert, you're a deviant, pedophile. I'd be like, well, yeah, maybe, maybe not. And I shook my shoulders with that. Yeah, maybe, maybe not. Because I know, for me personally, I know where my core morals are, and I know this doesn't define me. And when I didn't give those thoughts that value of like trying to shun it out, trying to reject those thoughts, I just let it fade away in the background, didn't give any attention or value, it faded away. And even when they come up still today, I do the same technique. And that helped me massively. And opening up as well with visual tourettic OCD to my family. I know it's different for everyone with this, and it can be difficult. And Chris Tronston really helped me with this, with the IOCDF, saying how to open up to family. Or let's say your closest loved ones. You can do it in small pieces, talking about OCD, mental health, see how they react with that. And if they're okay with that, then you can share, like with John's video with Ethan Smith about this presentation. There's YouTube videos, books, documents online by licensed clinicians that will back you up. It will say that, well, this is what it is. So that's what's really got me right now to a great place of recovery, with incorporating all of that, but is value driven and using mindfulness and self-compassion. But I will go on to the next slide, and I'll leave it with let John carry on.
And of course, I mean, you can leave the next slide up. I'm still on the last slide.
Oh, sorry.
But leave this one. No. Leave this one up. Because I wanted to comment on a bunch of things Matthew said. I mean, one thing that I'm a little sad, even about this presentation, is we're going to be giving you a bunch of ideas, and all of us would admit to you that they are harder to implement. And I mean, a lot of times they do need some outside help to implement them. It's not so simple and straightforward. So we're saying you have a reason to have hope and there are things to do, but yes, you might need somebody outside to help you do them. In terms of like going up a hierarchy, like what things are easier. Like one of the things that Matthew talked about, going on the beach. That might be a great place initially for practicing sneak peek, because I'm walking. It's really important that I'm walking as opposed to just sitting somewhere, because I'm walking. So the stimuli around me are constantly changing. And it's a little easier to do sneak peek if I'm trying to do sneak peek and accidentally, because I'm walking, it's not like I can just keep staring and I'm just going to keep looking at somebody. That would be a little more conscious. I'm walking with the idea of sneak peek, and I'm trying to do sneak peek. And while I was doing that, I would also make sure, for fun, that I'm going to look at other things to notice them. So I have a situation where it's easier than if I was just sitting on my blanket at the beach and there are people around me and it's like, don't look at that one, don't look here and there. So it can be hierarchical. I would send people in a mall, sit down, have a coffee, and periodically look at somebody. And again, trying to do a sneak peek. So it's a very quick look at somebody that nobody would pick up, as opposed to let me just stare as they're walking by. So I can arrange these situations. And another hierarchy step is I'm going to go and buy something, so that I'm now going to have to talk to somebody for, 30 seconds where I'm buying it. And I get to practice sneak peek in a very short situation. So I can arrange situations, and it's giving me confidence that there are times I can pull this off and be okay. Because the more confidence I have in one of those things, then the less it hits me. Because the major time it's hitting me is like, what if it happens? What if it happens? And one of the problems is that it does happen in this one. So I'm trying to feel that I get a control. And again, that's part of what Carol's talking about. By doing the habit control, I'm getting a little more confidence in my ability to do it. I do think it's imperfect, and that we have people who are successful like Matt and Carol, and I've had people do it, but it is hard. So, I want people to remember that, this is workable, and it is in terms of research, going to this slide, this form of OCD, although I've been aware of it incredibly long, but it is in some sense the least known form of OCD. I mean, a lot of colleagues, if I mention it to them, oh yeah, they've seen somebody like this. I have colleagues, when we first went to the Foundation. I went with somebody else I was working with to say we wanted to do a presentation. They didn't know anything about it. Like we spent some time talking to them, explaining to them, and they're like, oh. So there is, virtually not any research on it. So, if any of my research focused colleagues are watching this, it's like it'd be nice to do it because I think we could maybe find ways to improve research. Matthew had added validated on the list of OCD themes. And I know you won't be too embarrassed by this, Matt. He had the thought that, the other forms of things like ROCD and sexual orientation OCD are validated on some lists. Actually, all those subtypes of OCD are technically aren't validated. They are descriptive. When I say not validated, I don't mean they're not real. It's just they're not part of any formal diagnostic system. So from that perspective, visual Tourettic OCD is validated. It is real. And our problem is, how do we get more people to know about it? Because the more people know about it, the easier it becomes for sufferers, because there'll be some people who, will know what it is or have heard of it. And so we would like there to be more social media, more TV about it, and hopefully responsible, because we can always depend on the press to mess things up and sensationalize it. But to get people to understand it better, if you have if you're one of those people who can say, this is what I got, and you can just lay it out, or if it's something you want to do and there's a therapist, or you know what, you don't need a therapist. If you're not in therapy, if you were to contact Matt or Carol, like, hey, how do I go about sharing this? They'll talk to you and like, let's find out what works for you. There will be people who will not accept this. For every form of OCD, there are family members or groups of people who just say, this isn't real, and you're just blankety blank. So, that is unfortunate, but I can't pretend that it's not there. Do you guys have anything you want to add to that?
Would you like to go, Carol?
Well, everything you just said, Jonathan, is, says it all, really.
I'm sorry.
No, I suppose what I could add is that, Matthew and I are doing YouTube videos to raise awareness for visual Tourettic OCD. And I've written a book, Address Staring OCD. So that could be helpful, for some people. But I don't really know about anything else. The research, obviously that's important, but you've discussed that.
I think, and I don't know, you probably can't get it up this quickly, so you might just mention this, because we stupidly forgot to put this on a slide. I just realized.
Yeah.
There is a Facebook group for people with this issue that you guys are very involved in. How do they find that?
You find that on, like I said, you search on Facebook. It's Peripheral Vision / Visual Tourettic OCD, if I remember correctly of that name.
Okay, and could you just say it again slowly in case they, so
Sure.
people aren't panicking? In the Q&A, we can flash it up, but for anybody who's watching this after the conference, they don't get to see the Q&A. So once again, what is that site? I feel like an announcer on it.
Peripheral Vision, Visual Tourettic OCD Facebook group. And me and Carol are admins there as well. So any questions anyone would like to give, guidance, anything like that, well, best what we can do, resources, we will offer that to you, and we'll be here for you and support you as well. It's a great support page. Without that Facebook page, it would have been very tricky. So yeah.
Well, thanks for remembering that, John, and bringing that up.
Yes, well, as I was talking, it's like, right. I'm not sure we have any other things, or we're ready for Q&A.
Wrap it up. Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, to wrap it up, have both of you got any empowering or inspiring words to finish this off?
Oh, I feel under pressure. What if I fail? Oh my God. There is hope, and there are other people doing this, and I think actually joining the group is a place to find out you're not alone, and there are other people. And as always, in any group that people go to, there are people doing real well, and there's some people not doing real well. So my advice is always image, notice the people doing well, because they're the people who will be able to help you most. And hopefully by the next time we do a conference, they'll be much more widely known, and there will be less of a stigma to this issue.
Oh, that's nice.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, I love that. What would you like to add with that, Carol?
Well, I think I'd probably say stay in there and now, so that you make good judgment on what's happening.
Yeah.
And stick with your treatment, because it does work.
Yeah, really well said, Carol. And as well with me, this is such a debilitation, but you can recover, you can get better. The more evidence-based treatment in the future will be available, but you can recover, because we're living proof, we're doing it, and that means so can you, and we all believe in you. So thank you all so much. It's been great. And thank you, John. Thank you, Carol, with this presentation. You're both amazing and awesome with all the work you do for the OCD community. And we're all looking forward to answering your questions. So we'll talk to you soon. Thank you and goodbye.